Yep.
Greg, you look like an angel with that brightness behind your head.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay for our special committee of the whole meeting on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place, and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. And I want to further acknowledge that even though we're lands that are shared with the Potawatomi and the Mohawk, our near neighbors in all those in our area of Indigenous descent, people are zooming in from different parts of the province where other Indigenous peoples have been on those lands for many thousands of years. And so I don't want to be just exclusive to our area with this acknowledgement. Make which? Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? And I know we don't have any open forum for this. And just for everybody who is zooming in's information, I'm in council chambers with half a dozen senior managers who are both in person, but obviously attending online as well. And with that, process improvement. This is a topic that that Councillor Cooper brought to us with a dozen different items for discussion. A couple of months ago, we discussed the first half dozen and passed resolutions in many cases. Following up to that, 3 of them we wanted to bring back to this meeting, and then there's another half dozen, and we'll see how far we get on the list this morning. But I think probably the most practical is just to go through the list in order. And items 1 and 2 were resolved in that there were resolutions coming out of those that were confirmed by council. Item 3, even though we had some resolution, we did not confirm that by council. So we'll start with item 3, and that is identification and selection of consultants and experts. So Councillor Cooper, I'll let you lead off the discussion if you like, and then we'll see who wants to add additional comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lucky you guys. Thank you for the opportunity here to discuss a variety of matters. I just would remind us all that the reason this was brought forward was that Councillor Graziano and I were sort of very concerned about some of the especially financial situation we find ourselves in at the moment. Particularly, our legal expenses are incredible, and that's why we sort of developed, I and Councillor Graziano wanted to bring these matters forward. And while I'm happy to discuss item 3, Mr. Mayor, I am interested in identifying matters that will really have a significant impact on our financials, and particularly legals.
Thank you.
And so I'm not sure that we'll be saving any money or might be avoiding certain things. But I wondered if it was all right with the rest of you, since I've brought this forward, to have a discussion around a number of these matters, but see if we can identify things that will have a real financial impact, because we're now in not just the hundreds of thousands, but I sort of, when you put all the numbers together, look like we're closer to $1 million or over in legal expenses. And I realize that some of those are related to development issues, larger development issues, but we've got to deal with that. It's a real problem in my mind. Do the rest of council have any objection to trying to identify the way to find or identify a way to reduce our legal expenses?
I'm always keen to reduce legal expenses.
Pardon me?
Always keen to reduce legal expenses.
Does
I'm here
anybody,
to listen.
sorry, Brian?
I'm just here to listen.
Well, we're looking for your input too. If you have some suggestions as to how we can maybe deal with this, that would be helpful. But are you in agreement that this is worthy of looking at?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else objecting if we sort of change the focus slightly? Using these tools that are in these points here, but towards the financial aspect of it and legal aspect. Does anybody have an objection to that?
I
Nope.
just want to make sure that we are covering basically what's in our agenda and adding the financial aspect of the selection of consultants and experts. I have no problem with, but I think we have to understand that, you know, we posted an agenda that included identification and selection of consultants and experts. So to me, I don't want to lose that topic but I don't mind you adding financial as being one of the criteria as we discuss this topic, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think we posted a list, but we didn't say what we're going to deal with today. And I'm trying to say that maybe item 12 covers that off, which is basically protecting the township from potential liabilities. In this case, it's financial liabilities, it's legal liabilities, etc. And that's sort of so that's one of our topics. And I don't think we said, I didn't understand that we were necessarily going through it 3, 4, 7.
Well, if you wish to address topic 12 first, I'm sure council would be agreeable to that.
That sort of covers it off anyway, because it does say potential liabilities, and that includes financial. So yes, if that's okay with the rest of council, because I just, all these matters are important, but I think at the moment we've identified that we have a huge issue in terms of legal expenses. Maybe I'm wrong. Do others not feel that way?
No, I agree. It's illegal. We got to try and clean up.
So go ahead, please, and make your comments on that topic.
So I guess the question is, and I'm really going to be looking for comments from everybody else, but I'm looking for ways to reduce our liabilities, our legal liabilities, our legal expenses, and I'll just throw out. There's a number of things I could put on my hit parade, but maybe we need to be given the amount of legals that are costing us. Maybe, as has been suggested, we might even have to, for the next year or two, engage somebody in legal because the amount of money we're spending. And I mean by that either somebody full-time or somebody on a semi-part-time basis on retainer, where we can call somebody that we have a great deal of confidence in and get some responses, as opposed to, we're dealing with a number of different lawyers. It might not be a bad idea to have something in-house. So that's one thought. I do have other suggestions. I think one of our, aside from some of we have a couple of big issues that I'm not sure how we can deal with it at the moment in our discussions, but we do still have very high expenses related to going to the OLT. And we need to figure out ways to deal with that. And you know, if we were able for many years to have legal expenses that were 0.00 whatever, very low numbers, $60,000-$70,000, and maybe went up to $180,000. Now we're over $1 million. We need to figure out a better way to operate in terms of ending up at the OLT. And I think we have moved the bar somewhat, but maybe we need to move it further. So that's another issue that's on my radar. Do others have issues with that, or other suggestions that we could deal with in terms of reducing our legal expenses? Brian?
Councillor Bolchuk.
Yes, through you, Chair. I find that a lot of our legal expenses are council driven. And by council driven, I mean a lot of our councillors have personal agendas. They support their communities and are very biased to the way their community thinks. Hence, when we end up having to deal with controversy, the first thing council does is reach out for legal advice. And I really think that we should be listening to our senior staff, and when they suggest something, they're using all of their wisdom, education, and experience to bring it to us. And maybe we should start listening to them instead of disagreeing with them and ending up in a legal battle that costs us a ton of money. Not looking for an argument on that. I'm just stating the facts, that the way I see them.
Councillor Graziano.
Thank you. Through your worship, I think we have to consider the fact that society now, specifically Canada, has become quite litigious. I don't think it helps that the OLT has made the ability for people to go to the OLT as easy as possible. And at the same time, I think the common understanding within our community is let's just bypass council altogether and go to OLT, because that is going to be an affordable option, and one that will net out the results that we hope to net out. And so for all these reasons, I think that for us to fail to recognize the fact of where we're trending, and we have seen trend year over year increase in litigation costs. It's the objective reality. We're seeing it year over year increase. This suggests that it's not a council-driven cost, rather it is us reacting to the situations that we are confronted with. Now, we can always opt to not defend. We can always opt not to put the township into the best potential position possible, but then we would be doing ourselves a disjustice and likely costing us a lot more money in the long run. And we would likely have the wild, wild west with respect to development and building. So understanding that this is the reality on the ground, and understanding based on the cost increases that we've been seeing year over year, I think it's prudent for us to not only address this matter here today, but B, also look for cost-cutting measures. You know, I've been a large advocate for bringing in-house counsel into our office. I'm normally not the one to raise my hand and say, let's add additional headcount. But in this particular situation, I feel even if the person is not a litigator, and even if this person doesn't litigate on our behalf, they can move the files forward and get us 99% of the way to then pass off to a litigator who will prep and go into litigation for us. That's going to likely come at a drastic cost reduction based on my calculations and my understanding. And then in addition to that, when this person perhaps is not being utilized to their fullest, perhaps we look at co-sharing the costs with another municipality and or allowing other municipalities to utilize our legal counsel to assist in their matters as well. So this way we're not having unutilized time for this particular person. So I strongly believe that in-house counsel is the most prudent approach. I've said this, for the last 3 years. I'm going to continue to stand firm on this. We have to accept the reality of things. It is the way that we are going. We're trending higher and higher year over year, and our constituents are using the OLT to their advantage whenever they see fit, and that includes our larger developments and so on. And I think, frankly speaking, having legal counsel in-house would also be able to work with staff whenever they need to consult with legal counsel, as well as counsel in general ourselves, having legal counsel in our closed sessions there, and not charging $600, $700, $800 an hour, sitting idle listening to us discuss matters, and we all know it can take us a long time to discuss matters, and I keep hearing that that cash register in the background, that chime, cha-ching, 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 as we're discussing, and legal counsel is sitting there just listening. So my thoughts, and over to the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Petco.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think we all agree that the amount of money we're spending on legal is a problem, and it's the solution, though, I think is still complex. I don't, I haven't been an advocate for bringing somebody in house because I think our high expenses for legal are directly related to complex litigation cases that an in-house counsel that we would be able to attract to our community wouldn't be able to handle it, and we would have to outsource anyway. So yes, we may be able to utilize the in-house counsel to a certain extent, but I think that person would be sitting idle and not doing legal work for a good portion of their day. So I appreciate that that's an option. I just don't know that it's going to be a viable option that's going to save us money at the end of the day, because the real expenses are in the specialized work that we're not going to be able to hire somebody for. So if we have a way to look at our strategy for how and when we need to engage in a complex litigation matter, I think that would help, but I don't think we are completely in control of actions taken against us either. So I don't have a good solution right now, but I do think that when we're looking at our strategy, when we're faced with an OLT appeal, I think we need to look at more avenues than we've currently looked at and see if we have other ways of resolving matters that maybe aren't using a lawyer. And I don't know if we have an option to look at arbitration, mediation, some other route that is going to help save us time in the court and save us time with a lawyer. And perhaps our CAO has any ideas on how we can do that. But I do think if we are looking at hours of prep work for going to an OLT hearing or going to provincial court, I think that's where our big dollars are. And I don't know if we have a breakdown that could be shared from the finance department on how much has been spent on different facets of our legal hours. But I think that might help kind of illuminate where having somebody, whether it's part-time on retainer, a remote contract with a lawyer for doing the lesser work might be feasible and help hive off some of the dollars. But I think our main problem is the litigation. And again, I'll ask maybe if our CAO has any ideas on how we can examine the expenses from 2024, and whether or not our CFO Treasurer Ms. Radigan has um, any kind of numbers on how we're trending in 2025 and if we're anywhere near where we were in 2024. Thank you.
Ms. Rodigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coutier, through you to Councillor Bredko. 2024 was definitely an anomaly compared to any other year. So I would say there was one specific matter that resulted in such an increase in those fees that council is aware of. The majority of the costs are related to planning matters. For 2025, as you'll see coming forward in the June report, you are trending right on budget, maybe slightly over budget, but nothing compared to what council saw in 2024. It's coming more in line to prior years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, we may be trending in line with our budget, but we never know what's going to come up and blend in our lap and we have to deal with. Having in-house counsel, I'm finding myself in agreement with Councillor Bredko. In-house counsel could only probably direct us to outside counsel to handle any specific issue that we have to deal with. And I see staff so far as being very capable of doing that without having a lawyer in-house as it stands. So I'm finding myself agreeing that bringing a lawyer in would only help facilitate finding an outside lawyer. And as I said, I think staff already do a good job of that right now. The nature of these issues tends to be very specific and require very specific expertise. I don't think we want to have specific expertise in-house because then it's no good when we have other issues coming up. And having a generalist in-house will have its drawbacks as well. And either way, we know how much lawyers cost, whether they're in-house or outside of our immediate payroll. So I'm thinking that, yeah, we need to be more careful about certain things. I mean, the fact that we end up at the land tribunal on a regular basis is annoying in and of itself. They are planning issues, and maybe what we need to do is work more closely with our planning staff to try and figure out how to get ourselves or move ourselves away from situations that we keep finding ourselves in. So that's where I stand on that.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. So this is clearly a challenging topic of trying to reduce costs. I don't necessarily have a magic wand here, but I do have some observations, and I think we should be embracing a different strategy here. We have recently, especially on a couple of specific situations, taken the attitude of whatever it takes, do it. And that has buried us financially and on the legal side of things. So we need to, I think, be much more aware of the fact that we're going to lose at OLT. We're going to lose 90% of the time. And I think we have to be far more diligent about pretending to defend our communities when we know that we're going to lose. And if we can't win, then what we need to do is find a way to turn it over to the community and let the community defend themselves and support the community without burying us on legal expense. So that's one comment I have, and that reflects to incidents that I'm sure we're all very well aware of. The other thing that has been touched on by a couple of the councillors already is the fact that we kind of do this to ourselves. We put ourselves into a situation where Committee of Adjustment and Planning Council, who are by and large aligned on most of their outcomes and decisions, often will make decisions that are not aligned with what is coming out of the planning department. And I have to tell you, I am absolutely delighted with what came out of the planning department this week. This week, what we heard is that there are things that need to be done in the world of planning, but the site plan is the absolute last step. 2 years ago, councillors were adamantly lobbying for planning to think that way, and I am absolutely delighted that planning is now thinking that way. And so what I'm framing here is a better alignment between planning and decisions that have been made historically from Planning Council and Committee of Adjustment. I see and hear receptivity in planning to be very receptive to additional ideas that have been suggested by council and basically by the decisions that have been rendered through Committee of Adjustment and Planning Council. And I think that we are on a path where we are going to get more alignment between the recommendations coming out of planning and the decisions being made by council. And I was delighted yesterday. We had a unique ask by our Director of Planning for us as council, Planning Council, to document the reasons why we chose to not agree with the planning recommendation. So I see these as very significant milestones of bringing planning and their decisions or recommendations in better alignment with council. And as they do that, I can guarantee our OLT challenges and legal costs are going to plummet. So I think that it's one thing to talk about we just want to reduce costs. Well, yes, but I think we all inherently understand how we get to these positions where we have massive costs. And I think that, whether it, so I've talked about alignment, and I think that's really important, but I also think we have to recognize the first thing that I said, which is we have to recognize where we're going to lose and when we're going to lose and walk away. And there are many circumstances where I think we as councillors trying to defend and represent our community, where we have brought a matter forward or made a decision on a particular matter, and we think that we need to do whatever it takes to justify that decision going forward. But I think what we have to realize is, in most cases, we're going to lose, so we need to make a conscious decision to walk away and collapse the cost side of those interactions and those scenarios. More to be said later, but I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you. I find myself in agreement with a fair bit of what I'm hearing, in that personally, I'm not keen on hiring an in-house lawyer, and to be honest with you, it's based on past experience with other companies that I've worked with before, where you bring in an in-house lawyer and they have to keep busy. So they're looking for projects. And, while they can be very helpful in some projects, what are they going to do the rest of their time? And you end up being more litigious or get more mired down in legal costs because the lawyer has to be kept busy. I think, as a couple of you said, and certainly most recently Councillor Hazelton, yes, we have to look in the mirror and realize that a lot of our legal costs, because we as council, based on the information provided to us by either staff or legal counsel, have decided to defend where the odds may not have been in our favor, or defend where it was a matter of principle versus a matter of, I'll call it, practical or financial circumstances. I think sometimes, as frustrating as it is, and we get that we have this outside of legal as well, and sometimes we just have to accept we don't like it, but it's not worth the fight. I think that is for the sake of our taxpayers, our residents, at a certain point, we have to say to them, no, we think this, whatever matter X stinks, but we're not sure we want to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in trying to stop it, especially given what we know now about the OLT and the provincial government and their, I'm going to call it pro-development angle or approach. But I also think, and I'm echoing Councillor Hazelton again, and I also think we have to continue our communication with the planning department and and I think very importantly, concentrate on the official plan and zoning bylaw updates to make sure they more effectively capture than they do now the values that the community would like to see in those documents. I disagree, Councillor Hazelton, I don't think there's lots of cases where the planning department and council or planning council or committee of adjustment disagree with them. I think what happens is in the few cases where there is disagreement, they tend to get highlighted and therefore overemphasized. So it feels like there's lots of them, but there aren't that many. But I think that updating the official plan, updating the zoning bylaw is one way that we can reduce our costs, because then our professional planners will say, well, based on the official plan and zoning bylaw, we can't recommend the changes that a particular applicant wants to make. So anyway, that's my thought on that. And we're going to go to round two, and I see Councillors Cooper, Bocek, and Graziano already have their hands up. So Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of good thoughts, and I just sort of had started out with a little bit of my thoughts, and listening to everyone has sort of helped the juices keep flowing. And I sort of one issue that comes to my mind at the moment is this, and that is that in the last year in particular, and we're going to probably see more of this based on what I'm hearing about some of the other developments, are larger commercial developments. If you add up the taxes and the fees we collect for these developments, development fees and so on, don't even come close to what we spend in legals. So then the question is, why are we involved with these things? Or maybe if we're going to be involved and have to be involved, we need to do a much better job up front so that we don't end up in the glue. I know you can't always avoid that, and some firms are very litigious, but there are some examples, and we could learn from a couple that have been on our plate recently, and another one that's coming our way again, where we didn't particularly avoid legal implications in the future, and we, in some cases, signed off on putting in a road that would have cost us $1.5 million or something to put in, or $1.2 million, I think it was. That's where would we ever recover that kind of money? So that's just an example, and I'm just suggesting that we maybe need to separate commercial development, subdivisions, etc., from individual planning applications. I think they're different matters, and I think there are ways that we have to improve the way we protect ourselves and avoid liabilities, which we seem to end up with over and over and over again. Deal with commercial differently from individual applications. That's one. I think I really wanted to echo what Councillor Hazelton and Kutzier said, and that is I wanted to reference what we did yesterday, I guess it was, where we listed a number of reasons why our council had turned something down. And we haven't been doing that enough. We are doing more of it now. But the same would apply to the Committee of Adjustment. We have ended up sometimes at the OLT, and we didn't have our reasons listed, and that didn't do us any favor and service at the OLT. So changing practices, that's just an example, but it's one practice that I would highly encourage. But there are other practices and procedures that I think we need to look at as it pertains to non-large development. So that there's the reasons, there's the issue of alignment, of course, and I don't know that I'm biased other than in terms of my community. I'm biased in terms of Georgian Bay and protecting the environment, and having real adherence to the intent of our official plan and zoning bylaws. And in the past, and the reason that we're ending up with the OLT is that we haven't always kept that in mind at the top of the list. And that's why I'm biased, I guess. So we need to remember that even if we rewrite certain things, we need to make sure that we do have alignment. And some of the things that we heard about site plan, et cetera, are sending us in the right direction. But we weren't there before. And I hope we don't end up there again. A few other things. I think we could, in order to identify some of these things, maybe bring in some of the people. I know that I happen to be working with Councillor Hazelton on a working group. There's some legal experts, planning experts with a huge amount of experience that could, with an analysis of some examples, some lessons learned, do some case studies and show where we could avoid our liabilities in the future. These people will be able to point those things out to us and see if we can figure out a way to avoid those liabilities. And that's, yes, our planning staff can help us with that, but I think sometimes it isn't such a bad thing to get some other objective viewpoints. And some people might say, well, they're just biased to their community. No, they're biased to Georgian Bay and protecting the environment and not going over the top in terms of planning applications. So I would encourage that we draw on the talent that's very much available to us, and it often, well, it's pro bono. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Not too often I agree with Councillor Hazelton, but in this case, I think he reiterated what I said, just in more detail and probably fine-tuned a little bit. I have two thoughts here. The first thought would be, there has to be a method of mitigation and settlement before we get to Supreme Court or OLT or district court, because sometimes people just sue us for money, not just necessarily to get what they want in a planning realm. So I think there should be the ability to come up with a settlement before we get to that point. My other point is, I'm not sure that internal legal counsel would be the answer, but let's say we approach this in a different way and we go to district and say to district, we think that it would be advantageous for district to add another lawyer, a planning lawyer, to their staff that they already have in legal, and let that lawyer take care of the 3 townships and the 3 towns within the district. And how we would pay for that would be based on a percentage of usage. So if Gravenhurst, Bracebridge, and Huntsville take up 80% of this lawyer's time, and our township uses up 5% of his time, then we get 5% of the costs of the employee's wage. So I'm not sure that sharing a lawyer with townships outside of Muskoka would be a smart idea, because we have very, very different ideals. But having representation, somebody who knows Muskoka, we could really fill them in on who and what we're about. See if district would entertain such a thing. I think we have one full-time lawyer and a complete legal staff up at district. If we could make a case that this would help all townships and towns, we might have a good chance of at least getting them to listen. And it could be an option.
Thank you. Councilor Graziano.
Thank you. And through your worship, I had recently said that we have to learn how to walk the walk and talk the talk. I think we don't do that effectively here, my personal opinion. And allow me to build on that. I'm going to cite two examples that were recent. Yesterday, we as council unanimously stayed firm on an application that came before council, planning council, an application that was brought forward by an applicant on 6 Mile Lake. And we all agreed that our bylaws are our bylaws, and if it can conform, it should conform. And that was one of the bases for the decision that we made. We have an option. We can either be afraid of litigation and therefore allow people to do as they choose and then ask for forgiveness later, or we could stay true to what our bylaws state. We heard that there's going to be an updated official plan, and that likely will help harden and mitigate litigation. And again, I'm going to revert back to what I just said. An official plan update is going to do nothing if we inconsistently apply our bylaws in fear of litigation or the costs of litigation. So we as council either choose our battles and kind of weigh the pros and cons of letting one illegal build or one request go through and the other one not go through in the hopes of mitigating some costs, or we stay consistent and true to what our planning team has developed and what we have ratified. I'm going to use another example. There was another application that came before Planning Council yesterday whereby the previous owner of the property had built illegally and the new owner had come and asked for forgiveness. What do we do in this situation? How do we weigh out whether we say yes or no to this? Is it subjective? Or do we apply what our bylaws say and say, regardless of the homeowner, this is deemed to be illegal? Because the concern that I have is the precedent that we're setting by being inconsistent in our application. If we say yes to the gentleman who applied yesterday for bringing his illegal non-compliant, then we essentially are saying to everyone, hey, go ahead and build just before you sell everything that you want to increase your property value. Don't worry about council. We're not going to fight you on this because, you know, we can't afford the litigation costs. And then sell it at a premium and let the future homeowner deal with the aftermath. I don't think that in these situations this is going down a good path. I think we need to determine how we are going to stay true and consistent to what we have designed and developed. Now, I'm not going to beat a dead horse because it sounds like there's no appetite for internal legal counsel, and that's fine. But I do want to address some comments, specifically complex legal issues that get passed off. Well, I'm going to beg to differ and say that we currently, even though we do use outside legal counsel, still endeavor to pass off complex legal files. So whether it goes to our primary lawyer, our external lawyer, who then says, hey, this is above my pay grade, I need to pass this off to a specialist, it still happens today, whether in-house or external. So I think that argument is not necessarily a strong one, to say the least. And then sitting idle and not using the hours. And this has been a common issue that a lot of people have said, well, if we hire an internal lawyer, that person's going to be bored. And I'm going to say, no, I beg to differ. If we stay true to our bylaws, that person will be busy. If we are consistent in the application of our bylaws and our zoning requirements, that person will be busy. So it's a question as to whether or not we want to walk the walk and talk the talk, or whether we selectively want to weigh out what we're going to fight and what we're not in fear of the cost of litigation. And that's my comments. Thank you.
I just wanted to let council know there are probably a couple of council members there that aren't aware of this. We tried to partner with the district before for legal, and we did it for approximately 6 months, and there was a number of issues that came out of that that I'm going to say couldn't get resolved, and that's why the township stopped using the district legal counsel. So just something that's there. I'm not saying that you can't renegotiate or something to that extent, but staff has tried that in the past and it didn't work.
I have a couple of comments from all this. One was I think it was Councillor Bochek, but I apologize if I got the wrong councillor, was talking about the fact that, you know, we have different levels of problems, and that the subdivisions and the larger commercial developers is a different kettle of fish, if I can use the phrase, than the single resident. And what I find frustrating about that, because I'm not arguing with it, is that the subdivision approvals, that's supposed to go through district. They're the ones, in theory, are supposed to be taking care of that. And then you wonder why we face legal liability for district stuff. So that's one comment that is one of our frustrating things. And I heard from a number of you the comment about how it's important that we list the reasons why we say no in situations where our planner has said yes, we being, whether it's council, planning council, committee of adjustment. And I think actually that is part of our new protocol based on legal advice that we've received and other forms of advice, that if a group is going to say no to a recommendation, that we list and make sure it's recorded why we said no. So I think that's an important additional step, because I think it would be very informative. I have a little bit of concern with the expression, if it can comply, it should comply. Because if we take that in its purest form, then we don't need a committee of adjustment and we don't need a planning council, simply because then we simply say either you're within our bylaw standards or you're not. And I would argue that that would be unfair to our residents, because every property is different. Every property has different histories, and it would be impossible for us to create, and I believe, a bylaw that would be perfectly fair to all existing properties at this point, just because of all those great variances. And one example I'm going to use are people who have a cottage that was built decades ago that is too close to the water per our current standards, and they want to expand it, and that could easily be offside our bylaws and yet it may be a reasonable request. And I think we have found with the request to come in front of Committee of Adjustment and come in front of Planning Council, I think we would all agree that some of those requests are quite reasonable, some of those requests are too much, and some of them are in that gray area in between. And you and I may disagree of it, where that gray area actually falls, and that's fair. That's why we have a variety of people looking at this. But I think we have to recognize that no matter how good our official plan is and our zoning bylaw, we can't shut the door on people asking, can you make an exception under the following circumstances? And then we have to decide and we use our professional planners as advisors, we have to decide whether we think that request actually is a fair and reasonable request, or if we think it's too much. And we're always going to have that. So I think you know, we can be idealistic, but we know that with few exceptions, we don't have cookie cutter properties in this township because we're so blessed to be on the Canadian Shield and waterfront. So we've had 1.5 rounds discussing this. I think what we have to do is decide, are we going to come up with any sort of a motion or direction or anything like that we want to go forward with, versus just expressing our concerns. You know, for instance, one of the things I have heard a number of times is that we have to, in one form, and we've had, and it's been discussed in a number of forums, how do we continue, I'm going to use that expression, how do we continue to educate our planners on what the community thinks the proper limits should be for development? How do we work on mitigating or lessening our legal expenses? And obviously those discussions, we've had those discussions in close on specific examples where, you know, we've had, for instance, recommendations from lawyers where they say, well, you have 3 options, A, B, and C, and each one has an estimated cost, and we have to pick one. And we haven't always picked the most economical for various reasons. But what I'm hoping for with this morning's discussions, and you know, we're almost an hour in, is coming out with some sort of motions for or suggested resolutions for council to consider. So I'm asking, if we're going to talk any further about this topic, can we narrow it down to perhaps some form of recommendation to council? Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, personally, I'd like to keep the conversation going here a little bit longer because I think we've touched on some things that may be very helpful. One thing I didn't get out was I think talking to our department heads previous to us going to the council table may be a very prudent part of this. I'll give you an example. Our treasurer, Jazz, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name because I'm horrible at it, asked each and every one of us to, before it came to council, to reach out to her. And if you had any issues with it, she would explain it to you. And I did just that. I went into her office, I sat down with her, she explained it to me. So when it came to council, I knew it was the right decision to make. I do the same thing with our building department. If I'm not sure on something that's trying to come through, I go have a talk with the building department. Sometimes I go to the CAO and say, hey, we're going into council here. Should I or should I not do this? I rely on our CAO to tell me if it's appropriate or not. So I think reaching out to staff previous to us getting into the council room and have them really show us why they're doing what they do. And maybe you're not going to agree with it. Maybe you are going to agree with it, but at least you're not getting the 10-minute summary at the council table where you can't make a proper decision. You're getting the whole story, as much of the story as you want, by visiting, emailing, even Zooming independently with the department head to better understand what's coming to council. So that's just another thought that we can throw into the mix here, and I hope it's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
So I'd like to just point out that what Councillor Bocek just said seems to be fully covered in item number 11 from Councillor Cooper's resolutions, because that's the pre-meeting engagement strategy that would give us exactly what Councillor Bocek suggested. And I know that there are time challenges that staff are wrestling with, but I'm just going to outline my strategy for working with documents for agendas coming from coming from staff. I have now learned that there are often, and it seems every meeting, but maybe not. It just maybe it's a silly conclusion. But it seems that there are always changes to the agenda package from the time it's first released till the time that we then finally have the final version. And I have in the past attempted to diligently go through these things and make comments. But I make comments on the first version, and then another version comes out, or then another version comes out, or another version comes out, and all my comments are gone. And so it is very unhelpful for me to go through that process. So I've stopped even looking at them until the Thursday or the Friday before the meeting, which is really a waste of time because staff supposedly were supposed to have them available the Monday. But the point that I'm getting at is uh, participation and obtaining other perspectives is impossible if you don't have access to the information in a reasonable time. I did have an opportunity prior to our meeting on Monday or Tuesday, Monday, whatever, to connect with our director of planning. But he called me at 4:30 in the afternoon because he was on Thursday because he was taking Friday off. Well, good for me that I was able to connect with him and learn some things about that particular topic. But my point really is, we've already documented or I not say we, Councillor Cooper has already documented a key characteristic of how we should be working in item number 11. And I think that that would solve a ton of issues in getting us up to date and up to speed on these topics and giving staff an opportunity to hear some other perspectives that they may not have understood or considered because they basically don't live here. And I know I'm not a 100% resident, but I'm more than a 50% resident, and I have some very deep insights and understandings of my community, and I know other councillors do as well. And I think that it's impossible for staff who don't even live in our geography or not, in the kind of dominant areas of the geography, it's impossible for them to have the same insights and understandings that we do. So I think number 11 is an absolute, perfect step that we need to embrace. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And you were asking for a resolution, and I think that's a good idea, although I think there have been a number of matters that have surfaced this morning that could be process improvements. And so how do we, and can we get those into a resolution? I don't know, but for example, just to give you an example, I thought that was a very interesting idea from Councillor Bochek with respect to the district. And while we were cautioned about from Chief Van Dam, I think we need to understand, as I understand it, that the district does provide certain legal services to certain municipalities. I think a district, Muskoka Lakes is one of them. Maybe is it Huntsville? Maybe another one, where they actually have the services of the legal department at the district. So I see no reason why and I think they pay an extra fee, by the way. And I think we inquired about that, as I recall, and we were told they can't handle it. Well, maybe they need to then, as Councillor Bochek has identified, or somebody identified, that maybe they need to hire another lawyer so that they could offer those services to other municipalities that are part of the district. And I'm not sure how much we should be putting into that other than asking for it, because we're pumping a lot of money over there and not getting many of the services. So it's about time we said, hey, how about doing something for us? And I know we got some money for the hospital. That's lovely. And thank you, Mayor. But we have an airport that costs us a fortune. We have 2 new hospitals going to be built. I could go on and on. So I think we could consider that prospect of having a legal department that we could call from time to time. They may not be right for every solution, but they're sort of every question, but they may be able to help us with a lot of them where we shouldn't have to go to somebody at $800 an hour. So I think that's a good idea. I also want to say that, we've talked about a number of measures here and a number of practices, and we're already identified some process improvement practices that are being put in place, but there may be others. And that's why I suggested that we might want to call on some of the planning consultants and legal consultants that we have in our midst that have identified some of the things that we could do, or maybe they could advise us on some of the questions that we've asked here today. So I think it would be helpful to call on those experts. And if you don't know who they are, they've been helping us with various planning matters for a number of years. So that would be my other suggestion, is that we perhaps give some thought to how can we use that available talent. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I believe Chief Undam was making reference to the fact that, if my memory is working, a number of years ago, we did enter into a contract with district to assist with legal services, and we found that it was not working successfully. Based on timing, availability, staffing the district, whatever it was, the conclusion was that was not worth our while.
They didn't have the resources at the time, Mr. Mayor, as I recall. So I think what we need to do is sit down with the district CAO and the chair and say, can you figure out a way to provide these services to us, and so that we get proper services and decent response, or not?
Well,
that's the question, at least.
The answer at that time was no, they couldn't. Councillor
Well,
Boccia.
that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, I think that things have changed over the last few years. I think when the decision was made, I spoke to John Klink about this many years before I came on to district council. And I understand the reasons why it wasn't going to work. Today, all those reasons pretty much have gone away. Zoom is one of the big things. This lawyer's not going to have to travel all the way down to Port Severn, meet with us, and then drive all the way back up. Zoom takes care of things in just maybe 15 minutes. So I think technology has changed. I think the thought has changed. And I really think it's worth going to district with a new chair in place. Give us the best chance to make the rest of council understand why, and hopefully it'll benefit the other municipalities, the townships and towns. So I don't think we should give up on this idea. I think it should be put into a motion, and I think we should exercise everything we can to get this on the table up at district. I'm sorry, your mic isn't on, sir.
Thank you. A potential motion would be that we direct staff to inquire with district about the provision of legal services. So, I mean, I know it's very general, but we got to have them look into it. Councillor Predko.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, we talk a lot about bringing in an in-house counsel and relieving some of the external. One of the things that we don't really have, and this is something that perhaps the CAO could assist with, is, do we know how many hours of legal time we have been billed for, both in 2024 as an unusual year, and how many hours we've been billed for in 2023 or 2025 so far? Because, we're talking about bringing somebody in-house to decrease the overall spend, but we really don't know how busy that person would be on legal issues. And I agree with the mayor's matter that we do have all kinds of unusual circumstances that we can't just force everybody to comply with our bylaws. We can't send everything, say no, and have everything go to the OLT and then have to defend it. I mean, we know that if we do that, we will just lose. So is there a way for us to quantify what we think the actual workload would be from perhaps legal opinion hours versus actual defense and litigation hours? is that something that can be broken out and we can see whether or not there is a potential for a part-time person? But we'd have to really question, I think, unless that person was going to be remote, if you were a more senior lawyer and you could be making high six figures, working for a large firm and having your time billed out to different municipalities versus maybe working for us for a low $100,000 figure. You know, what's the incentive for somebody that is going to solve our billing problems? What's the incentive for them to come and work for us if the hours and the challenge isn't going to be there for them?
Okay,
So
Mariotti, would you have any idea of those hours, or I don't know if our treasurer would either?
Yeah, good morning, Council. I can, I think I'll defer to our Director of Finance. I mean, when we receive invoices, we obviously receive not only the dollar amount, but the number of hours that have been charged. And that will vary depending on which lawyer, which law clerk, which paralegal has put the various hours into working the various files. I'm sure it's doable. It'll take a little bit of time to go through the invoices and sift through how many hours we've been billed. I think to Councillor Predko's point, we deal with many different legal expertise. So we have planning expertise, we have environmental expertise, we have legal agreement expertise, licenses of occupation. You know, the lawyers that we use for corporate services are different than the lawyers that we use for planning and again for public works. So there's and of course when we go to litigation, that's where we then hire people experienced at litigating. So but we can check if that's council's will, wanting to know how many hours we've been charged for various levels of legal service. We can do that. But actually, before I say that, I want to pass it over to our Director of Finance to find out how big a job this would be.
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coutier, and through you to members of council. It is definitely something we could do. It would take quite some time to gather the data, as we would be sifting through numerous invoices to determine and then allocating it based on perhaps expertise and in which area. I would agree with what CAO Mariotti stated earlier, that it varies based on the expertise and the level of expertise. So it could go from maybe as low as $200 an hour to as high as $1,500 an hour. It's really dependent.
All right, Councillor Cooper.
Just to sort of maybe define this a little bit, I think maybe should address the issue of getting services from the District of Muskoka. It would inform our discussions if we had data that the last 6 months look like.
Believe it or not, I have something to read that Clerk Way prepared that you may, so far, will satisfy what you said.
Perfect. Obviously, I'm easy to read, but I would go on to say that, you know, I don't think we're going to, even if we use the district, it would avoid hiring somebody in house, and maybe this is a way to walk before we run by using the district. And maybe we are buying a service of 10 hours a week or 20 hours a month or something like that of people at the legal department at the district. I think they have at least one other lawyer that they've hired in the last few years, and there may be 2 others, I don't know. But I think there are people there that could answer general legal questions. When it goes to, when we have to go to court, there's probably going to be somebody else. We're going to need a specialist, maybe a planning specialist in many cases. So that's a different, and a litigator that understands planning. So there's some fine points on that, but to have that service available to us could be very advantageous. So I would just suggest that we gather that data and have those tools. And the only other point I'd make, Mr. Mayor, is that while I appreciate that we want staff involvement, but I think if we want to sell this, so to speak, we need a political pressure point. And I think our councillors and you can help sell this to the district chair and the CAO. So I think if we just give it to staff alone, I don't think it's, I think we can get some success by using our political clout, even if it isn't a lot of clout. Thank you.
I'm going to read the draft motion, Councilor Bocek, before I go to you. It may modify what you're going to have to say. I don't know. But the one paragraph would read, be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole recommends staff be directed to prepare a report, a report be prepared to outline options for legal representation, including in-house counsel, shared legal with district, identifying options to reduce costs, and data identifying legal cost comparisons over the past 3 years. And then I think, with some of that information, we'd be better armed to narrow down what we're trying to achieve. Let me narrow down options for how we can best address legal going forward. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. And really not too related to what we're talking about, but I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that this isn't the Township of Georgian Bay's money. This is our constituents' money that they pay in taxes. And then that money is used to fight them on matters that they're trying to get something through.
Okay, let's call this and then move the discussion. Okay, let's call this and then move the discussion on to some other matters. Councillor Hazelton.
Is it typed out anywhere? Is it possible to screen share and allow us to read it?
I don't know if it has been typed out. No, it has not been typed out.
Could you just reread it again then, please?
It was, be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole recommends staff be directed to provide a report, that a report be prepared to outline options for legal representation, including in-house counsel, shared legal with district, identify options to reduce costs, and data identifying legal cost comparisons over the past 3 years. CO Mariotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kutia. The last point about gathering data for the hours over the last couple of years, as Ms. Rattigan has said, is it takes some time, but we can do it. The first portion of the resolution, however, is quite broad and could take. It has huge ramifications in terms of identifying various options and working with a district, working with in-house counsel, etc. And I think we really need to be sure of what council wants to do before you send staff going down a rabbit hole that we may end up changing our minds. And I think a lot of this stems from, let's not forget, our legal bills were exceptionally high last year because of one reason that council is aware of. And I won't repeat Councillor Bocek's comments, but I think this year we do have in the budget legal expenses that relate to planning matters. But again, as Councillor Hazel and Councillor Cooper have said, we are becoming more and more aligned, and we continue to improve the process to mitigate any excess costs related to litigation. So I just want to make sure that before we spend a lot of time and adding to our workload, I mean, one thing is to simply go ahead and ask the district, hey, do you have spare capacity to that we can share legal costs or not? That's a simple yes or no. Identifying options to reduce costs. I mean, we can give you a whole bunch of them, you know. But it's a little bit, to put it frankly, it's a bit wishy-washy. I'll leave it at that.
I mean, if I may respond to that, to me, the last sentence would be very interesting if we could have that the information sorted, even if it's by type of legal advice. What I mean, like, we know that our biggest consumer of our legal expenses is planning, but we also know that you used lawyers for other purposes as well. You know, if we could have some of those broad categories, so we have some understanding. And I think identify options to reduce cost. Certainly, when we are in closed, we've had lawyers come to us or staff and say, we have 2 or 3 options, and here are the estimated costs with each of those options. And so it's almost on a case-by-case basis that we have to decide which option we think makes the most sense when we balance legal cost versus potential gain versus estimated odds, if I could put it that way. And I think in-house legal counsel, I think we've, I don't even want to consider that until we have a little bit of that legal cost comparison, so that we know, as I think Councillor Pretko pointed out, so we have some idea of how much external legal advice we're buying and in what categories. Councillor Hazelton.
Yeah, my comment is less on what we're talking about here and more on how to get the data. And we've been told in the past, and I think still currently, that this Town Suite is a phenomenal product. And I would be shocked if a simple search of show me all of the legal expenses over the last 3 years, either by sorted by cost per hour or by vendor or something. I mean, it can't be a complex query, and if it is, then we've got the wrong tool. I mean, everybody was saying Town Suite is a phenomenal tool. Well, if we can't get the data simply and quickly, then it's the wrong tool.
The tool may not have entered the hours into it. I don't know. I mean, certainly I would imagine the tool can give you the supplier and the dollars to that supplier. Councillor Cooper.
Since we're talking about tools, I hope we can get this data, because it would be certainly helpful, and it should be available to us, hopefully with, I call it Toot Suite, but and in Toot Suite time. I hope we can get that. And the other comment I would make is that I think if we put a call into the district and say, oh, can you help us? I don't think that's going to be we'll get the right answer. I think we need a political effort when we decide if we decide to go towards to the district. I would ask that our mayor, at the very least, one person go to speak with the CAO and with the district chair as to how we could make this happen. And it might mean they need to hire additional legal assistance. Maybe it's a law clerk to take on some of the load, but it's a service that we could really benefit from. But I think if you ask them, how can you help us, in a very sort of passive way, I don't think that's going to do much good. I think we have to sell the concept when we're ready to sell it. Thank you.
I'd be happy to approach the district chair and the district CAO on this matter. But I'd like to have a little bit of information first about what exactly we're asking for.
Agreed.
Councillor Predko.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I guess my other suggestion on getting this information on number of hours and categories of lawyer or types of law is, can we go back to our legal firms and ask them if they can summarize our invoices and amounts for us? They probably have that information in a format that's more easily manipulated than we do, and that would relieve staff from having to parse through trying to collect and summarize that information.
All right. I'm wondering, should we just simply at this point ask staff to come up with a legal cost comparison for the past 3 years, and ideally including hours and type of legal services provided, so that that gives us something with which to carry the discussion further. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. Through your mayor, I don't need, at least I don't need the nitty gritty of this. For me, if you were to go to 2024, take our total legal costs and take the average per hour that they charge us, say we use $450 or $500, take the gross amount that we put out, that's going to give us the figure that may give us some data that we can use. It won't be completely accurate, but it may only take them 15 or 20 minutes to get, and that'll give us some sort of idea how many hours we had 2025, 2024, 2023, just by doing some simple math. Maybe that's coming from a simple guy, but somebody could add on to that if they wish.
I'd just like to add, I think that's a good idea. Keep it pretty simple. We just need a general understanding of what the costs are versus, an incredibly detailed report. Thank you.
Well, I would imagine, and I'm looking at our Director of Finance, Ms. Radigan, I would imagine creating a list by vendor and amount by vendor by year would be pretty straightforward. And based on the vendor, you'll probably be able to identify the type of legal service, because we didn't go to lawyer A to take care of matters that are already being done by lawyer C. So I would imagine that could be done fairly readily.
I guess it was my misunderstanding that that could be done in an expedient manner, and I think if it was being taken off the table because it was going to be too much work, my simple solution would have been good. But if we're going to go to the extent of doing it by vendors and it's not coming off the list, then I'm very happy moving forward with that.
Thank you, Mayor Couture, through you to members of council. If council is simply looking for the vendors we've used in the past and their hourly rates, that is an easy exercise to perform. But if council is looking for a reconciliation of what we've paid in the past compared to the number of invoices and the number of hours and what planning or legal matter it was related to, then that is quite a lengthy exercise. And depending on the number of years, we would be sifting through hundreds of invoices for the past 3 years and having to document.
I think we don't need to know case by case by case listing, if I can use that word. And I'm using the word case to not just mean where we're in front of OLT or we're in front of particular courts, but rather just, I think vendor type would tell us the type of service. I don't think we, and correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, but I don't think we need to know which particular issue was being addressed but just a type of issue. Like, was it a planning issue? Was it an administrative issue? Was it a litigation, a lawsuit for injury issue? You know, like that kind of thing.
I agree.
Okay, so let's okay, I mean, I'm just wondering if we can simply say, be it resolved that the committee of the whole recommends staff be directed to prepare a report with cost comparisons of legal costs by vendor for the past 3 years, something like that.
Exactly, because as you point out, I think we can even figure it out. If we're going to XYZ company, most of the time we go to them for this kind of problem.
Yep.
And others we go to for a different kind of problem. So
what I'm suggesting council will just leave it with that one sentence, and whatever information that staff can provide, I'll call it readily, we'll be happy to receive. But really, if we do it by vendor for the past 3 years, we'll have a pretty good idea. Because we don't go to, for instance, we don't go to our planning lawyer that we use regularly for human resources issues. We know that.
exactly.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Cooper, second by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that committee of the whole recommends staff be directed to prepare a report with the cost comparisons of legal costs by vendor from the past 3 years, or for the past 3 years. All those in favor? And I got more than enough hands to say that is carried. Wow, hour and a half in and we got one motion. I'm going to celebrate by taking a 5-minute break. Excuse me. Talk amongst yourselves.
I just wanted to, the other councillors, if I could just add in Councillor Predko and Jarvis and Graziano. This is the book I was talking about. I guess you can't, I don't know whether you can read it, but it's Stolen Focus.
It's out of focus.
Just as a reminder, you're live and recording on YouTube.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just what I was talking about in a session. We were talking about using our phones, etc. The book is called Stolen Focus. The writer is Johan Hari, and I recommend it highly because this guy writes for The Guardian, he writes for New York Times, etc. Has written some excellent books. This one has to do with using your phone all the time and not paying attention to what else is going on in the world. There you are.
I'll take a picture of it, Peter.
Stolen Focus. There you go. He's also written a book about Ozempic. So there. Brian?
I'm here.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to thank you for that suggestion with the district. I thought it was excellent. And I think if we present it in the right way, we have a pretty good chance of getting some help. It's not like the district is spending a lot of money on us. They're not. And I think we can subtly remind them of that. And even things going way back to the water and sewer for Honey Harbor, that didn't happen.
Or the bikes or the bicycle path.
Well, and I can tell you the education center was shut down by the district.
There you go.
We got screwed on that. So between us two, and I don't like to hold things over people's heads, but I think it's important to, one way to sell this is to say it's our turn, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's such a different era now, with technology and everything else. I don't think it would have been possible 6 years ago. It wouldn't have been financially possible, but I think it is now.
Or practical, as you're saying, it's not impractical. But today with Zoom, look at what we're able to do here today. I just think how everybody says it's nicer to meet in person, and I agree. But I don't think we're holding anything back here today, and we're getting stuff done, aren't we?
Probably might be a good discussion to have at AMO as well too. Talk to other municipalities and see, how they're, getting their legals taken care of. I know there is a couple of townships I know that do go to the upper tier government to help with their legals. So a lot of people at the AMO and a lot of people to chat with.
Well, there's that, and I do know that I'm almost positive Muskoka Lakes is getting a service, and they're promised a service. They may be paying extra for it, but so what? They're probably not being charged at $800 an hour.
We should probably reach out to Peter Kelly and just ask him.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
Okay. I guess I have to turn to everyone and say, next topic. Councillor Cooper.
I don't get to pick the topics necessarily. I just have a couple of suggestions.
Please.
And, you know, if we're trying to work just down the list, I think number 3 was the next one that we did 1 and 2. I don't think we did 3, as far as I know. Did we?
I've tried to initiate the conversation on 3, and you immediately took it to legal expenses.
Well, I did, because I thought it was big bucks.
Yeah.
And this one is, we touched on this in our meeting yesterday.
Yes.
But I thought it wouldn't hurt to sort of bring a little bit more definition to it and sort of get it off the table, so to speak, if that's okay with others.
Let's do it.
Okay, so just, I guess really what I think is that we've got sort of 2 types of acquisition of something. There's basically procurement that would be buying equipment, so to speak, and then there's working and deciding on consultants that would come in and advise us. And I don't know that the council needs to be involved in all of these things all the time, but I was sort of suggesting yesterday that I think our staff should encourage hearing from council, because we may be able to identify people that will be able to bring us some real expertise, people particularly on sort of the environmental side, on the planning side, on the legal side. There are lots of some real talent out there, and often we get it pro bono. And you can say, well, there's no value if it's pro bono. I say there's a lot of value if somebody is typically billing out at $1,000 or $1,500 an hour and is willing to do stuff for you. Why not take advantage of it? It doesn't mean you have to necessarily follow the opinion you get, but why not take advantage of that? That's really all I'm driving at here. Others may have thoughts on this, but those are my initial thoughts anyway. Thank you.
I think, if I may, I see Councillor Jarvis, but I'll just make one comment. I think when we're talking about this, we may want to distinguish between council as a whole and individual councillor. And what I mean by that, if Peter Cooper were to approach the CAO or the director of finance or whoever and say, I think you might want to reach out to lawyer X because I think he or she is well informed on this type of thing. That's one thing. I think it's very different if we as council tell staff to go to lawyer X, because then we're giving direction as opposed to giving staff that flexibility to, call it pick and choose the expertise where they think it's best. So, and I think that's something we have to consider as we discuss this. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Thank you. Just to finish off on that, I'm not suggesting necessarily that it's council. Okay. I think what you've identified is a more clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth in a manner of speaking.
Sorry.
And I think pursuant to that is the fact that we have to avoid any actual or perceived conflict of interest when this type of stuff is going on. And that was part of the discussion yesterday. So, yeah, I think there should be some reaching out, either on part of council members or, I mean, heck, even if it was the general public or a lawyer who was a member of who was one of our constituents. And there's no reason why the services can't be offered and or looked into or investigated. But I think it's got to be on an informal basis.
Councillor Pedco.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, I would agree with all of that too. I think even in if we can encourage this to be part of the process for getting people on the preferred vendor list, and whether they're pro bono or not pro bono, they're on a contact list for the township when they want to do work. But I think we just need to be cautious of, I think, what Councillor Jarvis said, that we may have conflicts of interest with these people, and I think that's why if we put them into the process, they make a recommendation that they go into the process. I think the township will come ahead, and I think we just need to make sure that we're not involving ourselves in the selection process too directly. But I do agree. We've got lots of great people who are local, and I think our procurement policy and its grading that we've talked about before should take into account in the scoring that somebody's locale would be affected by their proximity to the township and their involvement with the township. So if we can include that, I know it's outside of the policy of the procurement policy, but I think that's part of more of the procedures. And I'm not sure if that's something that Ms. Radigan has an opinion on, but I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsir, through you to Councillor Pretko. That is something we can definitely do as part of our internal procedures. As for the preferred supplier list, that would be something that would be published on our website and on whether it's Badingo, and anyone who's willing to can bid on it. We are more than happy to provide counsel with whatever does go out. And if they wish to reach out to vendors that they believe would be appropriate, they are more than welcome to do so. So that is something we can definitely start doing.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really have much to say outside of I agree 100% with what Councillor Pretko said about a preferred vendors list. I think that is key. We can have solicitors we've used in the past, members of our community that would work pro bono. You put them all on there, and then you kind of choose which one is going to serve us best. I do have one question out of the realm here, and we're in COW, so I think it's okay to kind of have a little bit of freedom. When we go to the OLT, do we have to represent with a lawyer? I don't believe so. And my thought was, at the OLT, why don't we send probably the most educated person we know in planning, and that would be our director of planning, who we already pay for. So if it's not against the rules and we think we're going to lose anyway, why spend all the money on a lawyer when a staff member could do it? That's my question.
Well, one comment would be, if we made a decision that was different than the planning department, then our director would definitely be conflicted.
Of course, yeah, I got you. But my first part is I agree with Councillor Pretko about the preferred vendors list, because that would encompass everybody we could use, local, people with non-conflicts of interest. I think it's a good idea.
Councillor Cooper.
Just along those lines, I'd like to add that if we have people in our midst that could do the work and are interested in doing the work, one of the things that we need to add into our considerations is that some of these people will understand the township of Georgian Bay far better than somebody from London, Ontario, for example. Even if they're experts in a particular field, understanding the complexities of the township of Georgian Bay, which are significant, I think. Everybody thinks they're special. Well, I think Georgian Bay is unique, and not just special, but unique. And I think to have that consideration. So really what I'm saying to our CAO and Director of Finance is, when we're giving consideration to these things, and all things being equal, if we can bring in somebody that understands Georgian Bay, it would be to our benefit. That's all. Thank you.
I think, well, that would definitely depend on the topic at hand, but yes, the expertise would include local knowledge. In some cases, that would be very important. Councillor Hazelton.
Go ahead, I'll follow you.
No, go ahead. I made my comment.
I think we need to be aware that there are people that we should want to speak with and leverage their expertise, who would not want to be seen visibly as working for two different organizations. So I'm going to pick on a lawyer that we've spoken to, and Councillor Cooper has referenced many times, Alan Heisey. I doubt very much that Alan Heisey would want to be listed on our approved vendor list. So there are a group of people in the community who are holding down full-time jobs and will be concerned about the optics if there was somebody listing their name as an approved vendor for the township, because, as Councillor Cooper has suggested, most of these people or many of these people may be offering their expertise pro bono. And so although I like the idea of a preferred vendor list, and I think that works very well for people who are specifically going to be contracting, like our current lawyer, but I think that there is a huge value, as Councillor Cooper continues to share with us, in people who know our community and know our geography, and getting them to be visible on a list that could be found and searched and exposed would probably not work well for them in their day job. Thank you.
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Coutier, and through you to members of council. I wanted to provide clarification that an approved vendor list would not be appropriate for a legal listing, let's say. Legal counsel would be excluded from the procurement process, and that would be something that it would be based on expertise. And I believe in the majority of situations that have occurred, we've come to council in closed session, and council has identified in the past certain legal counsel that they believe would be appropriate. But a legal, sorry, I apologize, approved vendors list would really start off with your regular maintenance type of items, perhaps electricians, plumbers, roofers, that type of thing. Thank
Could
you.
it exclude planners as well?
I don't believe so.
Because I would position the planner and a legal expertise as being very, very similar.
Well, and I think if an individual or a corporation didn't want to be identified as a vendor to our township, then yeah, they're not on that list, but we're also not paying them. And I think we have to distinguish between those who want to share knowledge with us versus those who want to be paid for that knowledge, if you know what I mean.
And I think that's where the challenge here is, because I think the number 3 is intended to leverage consultants and experts that we have access to, many of who would provide their expertise pro bono. If it was a more meaty topic, they may want to be considered for contract work. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are lots of people who have and would continue to offer their expertise pro bono, but would not want to show up on a list, and that would fit into the both legal and planning categories.
CEO Mariotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Coutier. I just want to make council aware that any advice that council receives needs to be in a formal manner. So through a letterhead whereby where the lawyer works and gives formal advice to council. Notes, handwritten notes in an informal manner, yes, I would do this, I would do that, would not be satisfactory for the township. So I know we've had, or council has had, or members of council have had, you know, informal feedback like this pro bono, but to move the business of the township forward, it needs to be in a formalized manner. And the other aspect as well is it depends on the case at hand, because we also have to be mindful that if you have someone giving legal advice related to a matter that is possibly happening next door to that individual or close by to that individual, then we have to weigh the option of the objectivity of that advice that is being given.
Councilor Cooper.
Well, the considerations that are being raised by our CAO are certainly important. You wouldn't want biased opinions and so forth. That's certainly not what we're talking about here, or I'm trying to talk about here, or Councillor Hazelton. I'm talking about taking advantage of some very intelligent people that have some pretty good ideas. And it doesn't mean that we are going to hold up that name and their letter and say, here's some pro bono advice we got. It's reaching out to people that are pretty smart and listening to them. That's really the main point. I would also point out, and I really do appreciate what Jazz has talked about, that legal wouldn't necessarily or would not be on the list. And I like to hear that, because we must remember that we were told, or advised, I should say, by Rick O'Connor, that it's really, when it comes to lawyers, it's up to the council to give direction. He stated that in one of our sessions. And that's what the city of Ottawa and a lawyer has advised us of. So let's start paying attention to what we learned from that individual. Thank you. That's another expert, by the way, who did a lot of work for us for very little money.
All right. Is there, I mean, we've talked about what I would call two different categories here. One is I'll call it the formal procurement procedures and policy within the township, and the approved vendors list and that kind of thing. And then we've also talked about advice from experts that could be pro bono, that, you know, isn't going through, let me call it the formal township steps. And therefore, it may or may not be biased. It may or may not be, but it is, to me, it's somewhat similar to when we receive letters from our residents on a particular matter with their opinions. And sometimes we weigh a letter with a little more weight than others, depending upon their qualifications or what they're put in the letter. And I think that's a separate category. And so I think we have to be careful here that we're not we're not directing staff to utilize advice that hasn't gone through. Now, let me rephrase that. We're not directing staff to solely use advice from one source if it hasn't gone through all that, I'll call it procurement procedure, but to include it amongst the total information received on a matter. I think that's important. My next question is, do we, with this discussion and with nods I'm getting from various staff members around the room, and that, do we need a motion, or can we accept that we've said that staff has made it very clear as part of the procurement policy, they're encouraging us to encourage potential vendors to, I'll call it, sign up. And we also are encouraging, we're basically encouraging our residents with their qualifications to weigh in on matters where their qualifications might help us make a better decision.
And I think it would help if that was in a resolution. And
in the resolution, can you just throw it?
What you more or less what you just said, that we could do it. We have a couple of ways of dealing with these things.
Okay. I don't know if we need a motion with regards to procurement policy in the sense that we have that going, but we could, we could put in a motion, and I'm making these words up as I go along, and I don't know if the clerk next to me is busy typing on this. But one is we'd like to encourage local residents to come forward if they'd like to be on our approved vendors list. To do that through our finance department. And we encourage all residents to weigh in on matters, especially when their expertise could help us make a better decision.
Sounds pretty good to me. I'd leave it to others.
Okay, well, I'm going to let Clerk Way put that in slightly better English, or maybe significantly better English.
You speak good.
Maybe in Clerkese.
Mayor, you speak good.
Okay.
She can use AI.
I'm teasing.
You know how often I get you to correct my pronunciation and grammar. You're more the expert than I am that. And I'm afraid with age, my expertise is slowly slipping.
Mine's already gone way down.
How are we doing? Oh, Councillor Hislop will be pleased that we're having it up in front.
Yes.
Now, if only, oh, there we go. It's bigger now. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole encourages residents to request inclusion in the preferred vendors list, and that the Committee of the Whole encourage all residents to participate in public processes and provide correspondence. Or qualified residents who request inclusion. Yeah.
Qualified.
Well, it's part of the vendor list.
That's a term that has interesting implications. I'm not sure we want to have it in there. I would rather see encourages residents with specific expertise on township topics.
Well, are you talking about the vendor list now or the second line?
Well, the second line is somewhat nebulous. Encourage all residents to participate in public process as well.
We could say particularly those with expertise.
So here's the thing, and I'm going to talk about this specifically from a planning perspective. We killed the planning committee, and there were lots of people that wanted to offer expertise on planning related matters. The second line basically says, we encourage residents to participate in public processes, blah, 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 blah. But all the people that had shown interest in the planning committee have basically been turned away. We don't really care about you anymore. We don't want to have a formal committee, and we're not really going to listen to you anyways. So I think that
totally unfair.
That's I know you were going to say that. So that's I know you were going to say that, but sometimes you have to say things in a harsh way to get people's attention. And whether or not what I said is 100% true or not is less relevant to the fact that we have lots of residents who we want to always encourage to participate, but we don't really have the structure or the forum to allow that, and we don't have people reaching out. And this is really what Councillor Cooper, I think, was trying to define here or support, is we the township and staff should have a list of people with expertise, whether or not they want to be included on a vendor list or not, with people with expertise that staff could reach out to and could gather additional expertise, have brainstorming sessions, etc. It could be more of an informal basis, and it would never hurt someone on our staff to reach out and talk to somebody else in the community who has expertise, specific expertise. We'll call it, we were talking about legal expertise earlier, so we'll just leave it there. So somebody could reach out and talk to Fred, who has legal expertise and specific awareness and knowledge of the township. And our staff might actually learn something from that interaction, but the staff are not taking the opinions and bringing them forward in a replicated, transparent manner or duplicated manner. They're educating themselves on a matter that they wouldn't have been able to have that education if they didn't reach out. And I think that's where, I mean, we've heard from Rick O'Connor, we should be doing this kind of thing. Many of us counselors have been saying we should be doing this kind of thing, but we aren't doing this kind of thing. And I don't see in this resolution that we're facilitating it. If somebody has electrical contracting expertise, fine, they want to get on the preferred vendors list. I agree with that 100%. But if somebody has planning expertise or legal expertise or other things, we need a vehicle and a culture to reach out to them and engage with them so we make better decisions.
Okay. We're going to leave the first line as is, and the second line perhaps add that the committee of the whole encourages all residents with appropriate expertise. Can I use that phrase? Encourages all residents with all residents with appropriate expertise let's see. And
to share their interest in working with township staff collaboratively on township matters. And really what the second line is all about, township staff reaching out to these experts, because the experts are going to be reading all the material.
Well, I think though, in fairness, we need the experts, the expertise, the residents to reach out also to staff, because otherwise staff does not know that they're out there. And certainly counselors can make those introductions.
A little more input on the matter from my point of view, maybe.
Councillor Boach, go ahead, and Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think with the comments of Mr. Hazelton, yes, we did have a planning committee, but we found out that the people that were on the planning committee weren't probably as knowledgeable as we thought. And we found that out quite simply, that there was personal agendas. Those people were bringing their personal agendas, and it was always suspicious, but then there was emails flying around about what it was all about. So we have to be very careful about who we call experts or who we call people with knowledge. And there's got to be some sort of application or something so they can prove their expertise before we even consider listening to what they have to say. Because I'm an expert, you can ask for my advice and I'll give it to you. It might not be any good, but I could be classed as an expert. So we have to be very careful.
I think we have to leave it up to staff in their conversations with these residents to determine to what degree they can contribute to a particular topic at hand, whatever it might be. I'm going to go Councillor Jarvis and then CEO Mariotti, please.
Yeah, I'll be curious to hear what our CAO says, but I think I understand Councillor Hazelton's comments. I think what we've been trying to do and I don't think we failed to do it, but what hasn't happened is we haven't seen in my mind, we haven't seen a reach out by staff to residents with expertise. And I think that's what we're aiming for here. I think that's sort of the gist of Councillor Hazelton's comments, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But the idea and an example for me would be, again, going back to planning, there are residents within our municipality who have very specific planning background. And sometimes they're unaware of what's going on unless somebody reaches out to them. It could be us. But I'm wondering if it could be, and I don't even know if we need a motion on that, but perhaps if planning staff were to reach out to a planning expert who's within our municipality on certain issues, it might not be such a bad idea. That's all I'm getting at there.
CEO Mariotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good to hear. I don't think that council possibly knows just how much interaction already happens with staff. Council sees the various emails and communications by various concerned residents on files that affect them. But a lot of the communication that council doesn't see already goes to staff. And it can be from a resident who may not be specialized in planning or legal matters, but I'm sure there are residents who are specialized in planning and legal matters that do reach out to senior management and express their concerns. I've been copied on some of the communication. I know that some councillors will reach out to senior management directly and ask about certain files, and senior managers engage with those individual councillors and update them. So I think that there is a lot of what goes on already behind the scenes really this point here is probably a moot point, really. And if there's any concern that some members of the community should be heard more, well, let those members know. Do an e-introduction, and so that staff have their ears open and are able to listen to the various comments that our local experts have. But at the end of the day, staff need to make a final objective decision on a certain file, irrespective of the various voices that they hear on both sides of the discussion. I also want to go back to receiving advice pro bono that would be council directed. And I'm totally for it. I just want to clarify. I'm totally for receiving a council guidance on saying, hey, staff, please reach out to so-and-so who may have some background on this. No problem at all. The only proviso is that the expectation for the township, if council asks for the township to seek direction from an expert, that expert opinion needs to be in a formal manner back to the township, such that the township can then act on that information. That's the only reason why I say it can't be just an informal note or an email. It's got to be a formal means of communication and a formal expert opinion. So that's the only only clarification I want to make on that point. But by all means, if we're with a file and council feels that staff should reach out for an expert opinion from a resident who may be able to help with council's decision making, it has to be in a formal manner. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And just on a few of the points that have been raised recently, the last one just raised the expert opinion from a resident, pro bono, is just that. You're getting an opinion. And what you can do with that is consider it, add it to your data and information that you're compiling to learn from what direction to go, and you run that by your paid legal consultant. In this case, an example might be a legal opinion, and it might be then run that by what you learned pro bono by our paid legal person. There's nothing wrong with getting that information, and I'd like to see in the CAO Mariotti and the Municipal Act where it says you can't do that. I don't understand that. And also to expect, I think it's arrogant of our township to consider that we are going to pull in over our website or by phone calls from pro bono people. They're going to contact us. I think what it is we need to pick up the phone And I think our staff can pick up the phone from time to time and find out some of these opinions. And finally, I'd like to comment on the issue of our planning committee that was dissolved. That was partially dissolved because of one of the members of the committee had a very large conflict of interest, a pecuniary problem, and wasn't particularly an expert in terms of being either a lawyer or a planner. So just to make that clear, thank you.
Thank you. Right now we have this motion in front of us, and the only modification I'm thinking about is in the last line, to share their knowledge and opinions. I think it might be more appropriate, because to me that is part of why we would want the discussion to take place between those individuals. And to your point, Councillor Cooper, with regards to staff reaching out to these experts, yes, except they have to know the expert's name and number in order to reach out to them. And so I think that's where we as council could also play a role in making those initial introductions where appropriate.
And many of those have been provided. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton.
Modifying the last line, to share with staff their areas of knowledge and expertise on municipal matters. Because I think we're at a general state here. If we share their areas of knowledge and expertise on municipal matters, then, as Councillor Cooper has suggested, staff can reach out and get their opinions on specific matters. But what we're trying to craft here is something that will help, I think, evolve the culture of the township to understand first who these experts are, what their knowledge base is, if they don't already have that, and then encourage them to, through dialogue, leverage that expertise.
So I have moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole encourages residents to request inclusion in the preferred vendors list, and that the Committee of the Whole encourages all residents with appropriate expertise to share with staff their areas of knowledge and expertise on municipal matters. All those in favor? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry? I did Hazelton and Cooper. Sorry, yeah. Then that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Next on our list, if you want me to go in order, would be annual staff work plans.
Mr. Mayor, could I interject?
Absolutely.
I was hoping to get at least a couple of matters taken care of this morning, and I think we've done that.
Yep.
You know, we can go through and reduce our list, but I think if we did a couple each time we have a meeting like this, we'll be fresh, we'll have had time to research it. And I think I would like to see the next meeting we have, which I guess won't be until July, so that we can have Councillor Hazelton here. I would be inclined to say, let's talk about these two next time. And I'd welcome any input from any of you as to which two would be on your hit parade. So that's my suggestion, that let's sort of chew off, you know, a couple each meeting, and not where and be fresh for it, I guess is what I'm saying. Thank you.
I guess you're suggesting to me that you're losing some of your freshness.
I'm losing some of my which?
Freshness.
Well, maybe I am, maybe some of the others are, I don't know, but I think it also, these are weighty subjects and require research as well. And so some of it is doing a bit of homework in advance, is my suggestion, as opposed to
Okay.
just coming and listening.
Councillor Hazelton.
I think that I'm okay with that. I think I would offer, though, that item number 11, as it's currently written, might be an easy thing to approve. because it's really piggybacking on what we just approved. It's like a hand-in-hand topic. It's just taking it one step further, where we're encouraging and asking senior management to be that proactive, to take that proactive step and reach out for additional either counselor or resident expertise.
I'm fine with that suggestion. It does fit in, and let's get that out of the way, and then we can move on to our next subjects at our next meeting, if that would be fine with everybody else.
Councillor Graziano.
Thank you. And through your worship, I was going to agree with Councillor Cooper and advise that I'm inclined to push the remaining items to July if council so wills. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's look at item 11 in the next few minutes and see if we can come down to some conclusion with it. I mean, as Councillor Hazelton has pointed out, it's directly related to what we just did in many ways, the motion we just passed. And I'll just say to you, my concern is I would like to have some wording in there, such as where appropriate, because many a report or study that comes to council is such where reaching out to residents on the purchase of our next bulldozer may not be quite where we have to go through all this. You know what I mean? I don't want this to be every single study or report that staff brings to us. They have to put out notice a month in advance so that people can provide their input. And one further comment I'll make is often the report or study coming to us is something that council requested at an earlier meeting. So it's the idea of that report coming towards us is already out there. Councillor Hazelton.
You took your words where appropriate and put them right after the comma on the second line. That might accomplish the objective.
Any other comments on this?
Good idea.
Okay, so what has been it's more or less the same wording as here, but
vegan cheese, Charlotte. Okay. You want to take a nap? Do you want me to?
Yes, I want to take a nap.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, I think a nap is a great idea.
Did you bring your blankie?
It's magic how there's an alignment between 4 years old and anything above 70. So
Brian's got his blankie.
working a little bit on the words before it gets flashed up on the screen for your consideration, because it's a slight modification from what is in the word here. We have to put it where appropriate after up here.
Well, I guess in today's world of deep fakes and all kinds of other things, seeing is not necessarily believing. I saw Donald the Pope, and it looked pretty real to me.
Oh, that's a scary thought, isn't it?
Oh,
and I hope that without being political, because I don't think he's actually a Catholic.
It would be the only reason I would change my religion.
I'd like to see him go cap in hand.
So you're saying, Brian, that you become Catholic? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm a devout Christian. But I'll go for Muslim if he becomes the head of state.
All right, we're getting very close here, because
So Mayor, while our clerk is working on that, and I know that we don't have a deputy clerk, is there something underway to backfill before we have our deputy clerk come back from mat leave?
Christine?
What happened?
There was a posting that closed 2 weeks ago for an administrative assistant in the clerk's office, and interviews will be conducted this week.
Okay.
We're not far out from Sydney returning, are we?
Next year.
Depends how you determine far out.
Well, 16 months I thought would be up by now because I seen her baby and I thought the baby was probably getting close to a year old.
One baby was born in. Well, no, I don't think we're going to see her. My guess is January. My guess, which has now been informed, is we probably won't see her until January 2026.
Oh, wow.
And which is 16 months. Or 18? Or 15 months.
God, I'd get pregnant if I could get that much time off.
No, I was going to make an inappropriate remark, Councillor Bocek, and I'm glad.
It looks like I'm pregnant. I know it already looks like I'm pregnant. I get it.
Okay, so what we have now, it's ready to be put on front of us. Okay, so this is going to be moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Cooper. And it's going to read, be it resolved, I got those words I got. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council for staff to be directed when producing, I got rid of that too, okay. For staff to be directed when producing a report or study, where appropriate, a list be published of the topics under review to Council and the community well in advance of producing the report or study, to welcome participation and input from both councillors and residents, in addition to staff conducting their own research and input to be invited in the form of working groups, direct submissions, and one-on-one conversations. We have two welcomes. So if we get rid of welcome.
We just want to kind of reinforce that it's welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Well, okay, but I don't know if we want to formally stutter. Councillor Graziano.
Enough already.
Thank you. I'm just concerned with regards to where appropriate. That's not necessarily all that prescriptive. So I'm just trying to understand how where appropriate is determined.
Well, it'll be difficult for us to define it really carefully, but I think we should be able to judge based on the nature of the report or study.
Can I provide,
Yep.
if I may, I'm going to provide an example. In the month of April, the township was awarded strong mayor powers effective May 1st. There is no one within the community that I'm aware of that would have that knowledge in advance, and I needed to prepare a report for the May meeting. So there wouldn't have been time to provide advance notice and seek public consultation on such a report. So I think that's the type of circumstance where appropriate, we wouldn't be able to publish in advance such a report.
And in the alternative, if with this, if we talk to our bylaw about the firearm discharge a couple of months ago and said this report's coming forward, but we sort of did it now because we had a cow meeting, then that gave everybody opportunity to weigh in, and certainly, thankfully, a number of people have. Councillor Predko.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I'm just trying to wonder how this could could be done in a way that is public and not more work for staff. And the one thing I'm considering is perhaps there's an agenda item at the end of or a new business item that's published for councillor or cow, that would be reports coming expected to come the following month that input is being sought. That's the only public place I can think that we could do this without making more work for staff. And would that be a feasible thing? It would give visibility for anybody reading the council or cow agendas, and it would also satisfy the intent of this motion.
Councillor Hazelton.
Yes, I fully agree that there needs to be some visibility, and sounding like a bit of a broken record, for a while there, I was asking repeatedly for schedules of topics in future meetings, but I've been told repeatedly that that's not happening. So somehow we need to get that information out there. And whether it's, as Councillor Predko just suggested, or whether it's a calendar of topics going out 2 or 3 months, or just simply the public notice process that is articulated in this resolution here, somehow there needs to be this process of information sharing and kind of alerts of what's happening down the road.
CEO Mariotti.
Thank you, Meg. Good to you. Council is aware of our work plan and resolution tracker. So council already sees what's being worked and coming down the pipeline. Now, what we could do is we could put every staff report in at a cow session, and we could start the public consultation process at that point, as opposed to bringing a report to council, which is essentially what we did for the discharge bylaw. We brought it to cow yesterday, which essentially started the process of feedback on comments and going out to the community for feedback. I worry that this resolution, not only will it remain perennially on the resolution tracker, but also that it is going to start blurring the lines between staff being able to do their job and there being an awful lot of back and forth, which will result in us not being able to close out different files.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. I sort of like the idea of something coming to Cal first. I know it may slow things down a little bit, but frankly, it's not just about getting. I think it's important to get stuff done, so to speak, but I think it also needs, like with our planning, a high degree of consultation with our communities and giving them the opportunity, including our council, the opportunity to be fully aware of what was going on well in advance. So there is a benefit handling it through Cal. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm pointing myself in agreement with the comments just made. What I'm finding with this motion is I don't understand it at all. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever in its current context. But I do like the idea of providing more public opportunity for input into what we're up to. There's a high level of transparency with that attitude towards how we do things. I mean, it is a democracy we're in, so that's kind of good. It will slow the process down, and the public's got to be aware of that. And that may become an issue and something we'll have to deal with down the road. But I have no problem with the whole concept of, as with the firearms discharge bylaw, I think, yeah, we need to see where we can allow for more public input on these things. And it would be interesting to see what that, how it encourages the public input. I don't see this motion providing that. I don't see this motion providing anything but confusion. So we either have to do something about distill this motion somehow or change it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. And I wasn't going to relate to this, but through or to Councillor Jarvis, this is going to speed things up, believe it or not slow it down. And I'll give you an example why. At the District of Muskoka, we do exactly this, except instead of a COW meeting, we have a committee meeting. Everything gets discussed in the committee meeting, and then when it comes to council, it's 30 seconds and it's voted on. Because there was a report given to council by the committee chair, and it's already been ratified and everything's been decided that's the right move to make. So it goes in the council meeting. We get out of council sometimes 45 minutes with 10 decisions. So I really believe that if we use this COW, very similar to the way we use committees at the district, it will make things more efficient and speed things up.
CEO Mariotti.
Yeah, so if we can refine the resolution, and it may take longer, it may not, but if we can refine the motion to simply state that where possible or where appropriate, that staff reports will first come to committee of the whole for discussion and start the public consultation process that way. And then if there is a reason why we had to go straight to council, and Ms. Way gave the example of the strong mayor powers issue, then we can always put in our report the reason why we had to come straight to council as opposed to bring a report to committee of the whole.
Frankly, I really personally like this idea of things coming to committee of the whole initially, and I compare it to planning council, where we quite often have public meetings prior to the meeting where we actually get a recommendation from staff. So that public meeting allows for all sorts of input from any residents who are interested. It's published, and the resident doesn't have to panic. And what I mean by that is it comes in front of the public, there is discussion, but that doesn't, that the resident is still allowed to write in correspondence the following week that will be considered before the report is finalized by staff. And I think the COW would, and I say this firearm discharge bylaw is a perfect example of that, where it came to COW and nobody had to panic because decisions haven't been made. There was a draft report provided. And it's always easier to have conversation when you have a draft in front of you versus nothing, even if the draft ends up being turned around 180 degrees. At least you have a starting point. And so I think what we're basically saying here, if this is what we're talking, the direction we're going, is that where possible, reports will be presented to COW prior, like a month prior or more, depending upon circumstances, coming in front of council for a decision. That gives the residents lots of time. It also gives council the opportunity to advise some of their residents, if they know they'll be very interested in the topic, to say, you should read this report, and do you have any input? Councillor Hazelton.
I would like to see the last line, in advance of consideration by council.
That's a better word, I think. Final decision.
Advance of consideration instead of final decisions. And final comes out. Thank you.
There could be huge cost savings when it comes to lawyers if we take this process seriously. Big difference in legal costs.
Yep.
So I have moved by Councillor Hazel and second by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that committee of the whole recommend to council for staff to be directed when producing a report, when possible.
Repetitive.
We'll reword it slightly. Be directed when producing a report to present to committee of the whole first.
Just put the word "and." when producing a report and where possible,
comma,
uh,
When be directed.
I think we're missing a word too between directed and present.
Two.
Okay, so
Or something.
you resolve the committee of the whole recommend to council for staff to be directed to present reports to the committee of the whole first, when possible, permitting time for residents to provide comments and feedback in advance of consideration by council. All those in favor? All right, and that looks like it is carried, so that takes care of item 11, and it's now 11:39. I can see Councillor Cooper's eyelids drooping. Okay, I made that one up. So why don't we then say, moved by Councillor Predko, sent by Councillor Bocek, be it resolved, the committee of whole is now adjourned at 11:40 a.m. to reconvene, I'm going to say July, not June. Oh, sorry, that's the next meeting of committee of the whole. It's not the special meeting. Councillor Cooper.
My eyes may be drooping, but I just wanted to thank everybody that's been some really good discussion. And I think we've been quite successful at moving some things forward, and especially this last item. Well done. So I'm sorry to interject here, but I just wanted to, I think it's encouraging that, we have these kinds of discussions. Some good things come out of it. Thank you.
One last thing for me as well. Councillor Graziano, Councillor Stephen Pretko. I seen your names on a list to be golfing this Saturday up at Seguin. Is that the truth?
Not golfing, no, but I'll be attending.
Oh, for the dinner?
facts.
For the dinner.
I cannot attend. It's my wife's 60th birthday and Mother Day celebration wrapped together on that day. So
okay, right on.
I think there should be a correction. I'll be drinking, not golfing.
I'm going to call this meeting, I'm going to call for the meeting to be adjourned. I'm going to ask that we wipe out the special cow for June, and our next one will be in July, based on, I think at least a couple of councillors may be absent in June for that meeting. So with that, we'll get that updated later. But in the meantime, be it resolved, the committee of the whole is now adjourned at 11:41 a.m. to reconvene on June 3rd, 2025, or the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are adjourned at 11:41. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you.